There's a moment that happens often in hospice. It doesn't come with warning. It doesn't sound dramatic. It usually arrives in a whisper or in the quiet space between breaths. Sometimes it happens late at night when the room is dim and the machines are silent. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the afternoon with sunlight resting gently on the blanket. A patient will look at me, not past me, not through me, but at me. And in that look, there is something they've been holding. It's rarely about fear. It's rarely about pain. It's almost always about love. In these final weeks, when the body begins to let go and the world grows smaller, people become very clear about what matters. The noise fades. The unfinished errands don't seem as important. Even long-held grudges lose their weight. What remains is something simple, something tender, something deeply human. And yet, even when families sit right beside the bed, holding hands, adjusting pillows, brushing hair back from tired foreheads, there are words that often go unspoken. Not because they aren't felt, not because they aren't true, but because saying them out loud can feel heavier than carrying them quietly. Over the years, I've been entrusted with many things in those soft, sacred hours: hands, tears, silence, and sometimes a message. A single sentence a patient wants their family to know. A truth they carry in their chest but cannot quite release into the room. It's never complicated. It's never about possessions or instructions. It's one simple thing, and it's the one thing they struggle to say themselves. There is something I have learned after sitting beside so many beds in the quiet hours of hospice. When the room grows still and the hallway lights are dimmed, when family members step out for coffee or a moment of air, that is often when the real conversations begin. Not loud conversations, not dramatic confessions, just soft, almost fragile truths that patients have been holding close for a long time. They don't usually start by saying, "Can you tell them something for me?" It unfolds slowly, a sigh, a long pause, eyes fixed on the ceiling or resting on a photo across the room. Sometimes their voice is barely above a whisper, and I have to lean in close, careful not to rush them, careful not to fill the silence too quickly. And what they say over and over again in different words and different accents at different ages is this: "I don't want them to feel guilty. It surprises people when I share that." Many assume that at the end of life, patients want to pass along advice, secrets, or apologies. But more often than anything else, they want relief for the people they love. They are not thinking about themselves as much as you might imagine. I have sat with mothers who worried their children would replay every argument they ever had. I have listened to husbands who feared their wives would blame themselves for not catching the illness sooner. I have held the hands of grown sons who whispered that their daughters would think they hadn't done enough. The words change, but the heartbeat of the message is the same. Tell them it's not their fault. They say things like, "She tried her best," or "He did everything he could," or "I know they love me." But underneath those sentences is a deep awareness that after they are gone, the people they love will search for mistakes. It is one of the most human things we do. When someone dies, especially someone we love deeply, we turn into detectives. We go back through memories, looking for clues. We replay doctor's appointments in our minds. We question decisions. We think about the day we were too tired to visit, the call we missed. The moment we lost patients, patients know this. Even when they are weak, even when their bodies are shutting down, their hearts are still paying attention. They see the exhaustion in their daughter's eyes. They notice the way their husband hasn't slept properly in weeks. They sense the quiet panic behind brave smiles. And they worry. There was a woman once in her late 70s who had 3 sons. They rotated shifts at her bedside, each one convinced he needed to be the strong one. They whispered outside her door about medications and feeding schedules, about whether they should have chosen a different treatment months earlier. They thought she couldn't hear them, but she could. One evening, when the room was calm and only a small lamp was on, she squeezed my hand and said, "They think they failed me." Her voice was thin, but her eyes were clear. "They didn't," she said. "They loved me. That's all I ever needed." She asked me in that quiet, steady way to make sure they understood that. Not in a big speech, not in a formal announcement, just gently, when the time was right. Another patient, a man in his early 50s, had a complicated relationship with his brother. They had spent years barely speaking. It wasn't dramatic, just distance. Life got busy, pride settled in. When his diagnosis came, they reconnected, but there were still unspoken things between them. One night, after his brother left, he stared at the doorway for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "He keeps saying he should have called more." His breathing was labored. Each sentence took effort. "I don't want him carrying that," he said. "We were both stubborn." He didn't want to sit down and have a heavy conversation. He didn't have the energy. He didn't want to see tears he couldn't fix. But he wanted me to understand something important. That forgiveness had already happened in his heart. That is something I see again and again. Patients do their forgiving quietly. They let go of old disappointments. They soften toward people who once hurt them. They replay memories and choose to remember the good parts. And in that softening, they don't want their loved ones punishing themselves long after they are gone. There is a kind of clarity that often comes near the end of life. It doesn't happen to everyone in the same way, but when it does, it is unmistakable. The noise of daily life falls away. The arguments that once felt enormous shrink into something small and almost tender. What remains is connection. And in that clarity, guilt feels unnecessary. But families don't know that. Families are busy doing. They are managing medications, talking to doctors, filling out paperwork. They are sleeping in chairs. They are holding cups of water to dry lips. They are trying to be strong. They are trying not to cry too much. They are trying to say the right things. In the middle of all that effort, they miss the quiet truth their loved one is already living. That love has been enough. I remember a father who was deeply worried about his teenage daughter. He felt he had missed too many of her school events because of work. He thought he had been too strict. As his illness progressed, she rarely left his side. She did his hair. She read to him. She played his favorite music softly in the background. One afternoon, he asked me, "Do you think she knows I was proud of her?" I told him I believed she did. He nodded, but his eyes filled with tears. "She's going to think I didn't say it enough," he whispered. "She's going to think she needed to do more for me." Then, after a long pause, he said, "Tell her I was the lucky one." That sentence stayed with me. Tell her I was the lucky one. Not tell her to be brave. Not tell her to move on quickly. Just tell her that her presence, her love had been more than enough. That is the heart of it. Patients are not keeping score the way families are. They are not measuring love in perfect attendance or flawless decisions. They are measuring it in small things, the way someone adjusted their blanket, the way a hand was held during a difficult moment, the way laughter still found its way into the room. They don't want the people they love to sit years later at a kitchen table and think, if only I had. They don't want anniversaries filled with regret. They don't want their memory tangled up in self-blame. Sometimes the guilt families carry is about bigger decisions. Choosing hospice itself can weigh heavily on someone's heart. I have heard daughters whisper, "Did I give up too soon?" I have seen spouses stare at the floor and ask, "Should we have tried one more treatment?" Patients sensed that struggle. One man who had made the decision to stop aggressive treatment was very clear in his mind. He was tired, he wanted comfort, he wanted to be home, but his wife struggled with the choice. She felt like agreeing meant surrender. In the quiet of an early morning before she arrived, he said to me, "She thinks she chose this." He shook his head slowly. "I chose this," he said. "I'm at peace with it. She needs to know that." He didn't want her carrying the weight of that decision alone. He wanted her to understand that letting him rest was not the same as letting him go out of love. There is such tenderness in that, even as their own bodies are failing, they are still protecting the hearts of the people they love. I have noticed that guilt often grows from love. The deeper the love, the deeper the fear of having fallen short. Families look back and see imperfections. Patients look back and see devotion. That difference in perspective is powerful. A woman once told me, "He thinks I was lonely when he worked all those years." Her husband had been a provider. Long hours, many sacrifices. He worried that he had missed too much. As she lay in her bed, frail and tired, she smiled softly when she talked about him. "I was never lonely," she said. "I was proud." She asked me gently to remind him of that, not to let him rewrite their story into something filled with regret. It is humbling to be trusted with these messages. Sometimes I deliver them directly. Sometimes I simply create space for families to hear them on their own. A quiet prompt, a soft encouragement. "She knows how much you love her. He told me he's at peace. You've done everything you could." Often when families hear those words, they cry in a different way. Not the sharp cry of fear, but the release of something they've been gripping too tightly. And yet, even with reassurance, guilt can linger. Because after someone dies, the silence is loud. There are no more chances to clarify, no more opportunities to ask, "Are you sure?" The mind fills in the gaps. That is why this message matters so much. The one thing patients ask me to tell their family but struggle to say themselves is that love has already covered the imperfections. I remember a quiet grandmother who had been in hospice care for several weeks. Her granddaughter visited every afternoon after school. They would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes just holding hands. The girl once forgot to come because of a school event. She arrived the next day in tears, apologizing over and over. After she left, the grandmother smiled at me. She thinks I was upset, she said. I was happy she's living her life. Not come every day, not don't forget me, but live. She did not want her granddaughter chained to her bedside out of obligation. She wanted her free. There is something sacred about witnessing this shift in perspective. When time becomes short, priorities rearrange themselves. Pride softens, expectations loosen. What matters is presence, not perfection. But families don't always know that. They are too close, too involved, too afraid of losing. Patients, in their own quiet way, are often further along in acceptance than the people sitting beside them. They have had long nights alone with their thoughts. They have felt their bodies change. They have listened to the rhythm of their own breathing and understood what it means. In that understanding, many of them release blame. They release blame toward themselves. And they hope more than anything that their families will do the same. At the end of life, I have noticed over and over that what truly matters is not what was done perfectly, not the flawless plans or the careful decisions, but that love was present, that love existed in small moments, in gestures that seemed ordinary at the time, in the quiet attentions that no one else might have noticed, but that made a world of difference. It's the way a hand rested lightly on a shoulder when words weren't enough. It's the gentle hum of a song played at the right time, the warmth of a blanket tucked just so, the way someone made tea exactly how you liked it without a word being spoken. These small things, these acts of love, accumulate into a presence that is felt deeply even when life is leaving the body. I remember a patient, an elderly man who had been in hospice for weeks, lying quietly in his room. His children came and went, busy with their lives, yet every visit he had, he made sure to meet them with attention and a smile. He didn't lecture them about choices made in the past. He didn't recount regrets. Instead, he remembered the way each of them laughed as children, the tiny ways they showed care for one another, the countless ordinary acts that formed the fabric of their family. In his last days, he asked me to remind them of this, that they had loved him, that they had been there for him, and that this was the most important thing.